we need to do these extra steps, I think, right now.
Jim Suttle joins mayors around the country calling on lawmakers to end gun violence. He's one of several community leaders pushing for stronger background checks before you can buy guns. And many of those leaders are now urging people to call their congressional representatives. Good evening, I'm Brandy Peterson.
I'm Rob McCartney. This comes after a series of shootings in the metro. KETV News Watch 7's Todd Anders has details on the mayor's effort in our big story at 6. Todd?
Rob, Mayor Suttle is one of more than 100 mayors speaking out today. He says additional steps need to be taken beyond the enforcement of existing gun control laws in order to stop the violence, but Second Amendment advocates say expanded background checks are not the way to go. With community activists backing him, Omaha Mayor Jim Suttle echoes a message sent out around the country.
We want to mobilize the citizens in our respective communities around the country to ask for their local representatives for the common sense and reforms.
Specifically, gun control reforms.
It's time for Congress to take that action that we're calling for and pass legislation requiring mandatory background checks for all gun purchases.
The announcement, part of the national group Mayors Against Illegal Guns push to stop gun violence, an effort mirrored by President Obama's calls to Capitol Hill Thursday. Back in the metro.
Just this past summer, I lost 2 cousins to gun violence. To me, it seems logical to have a background check on gun purchases.
Activists agreed with the mayor, saying mandatory checks would help curb violent crime in Omaha.
The illegal guns, we've got to get them off the street. We've got to stop the flow. And one of the issues is this background check issue. We have been notified that it's one of the biggest loopholes for illegal guns coming into urban communities.
But Second Amendment advocates tell us strengthening background checks would not help.
Universal background checks are not beneficial, and background checks have never stopped any kind of crime or any kind of a shooting.
Firearms training expert Patrick Smith says enacting the kind of new laws the mayor's group is calling for would end up having an undesired effect.
It sounds very harmless and fine. But the reality is that what they're trying to do is they're going to create a national registry of firearms. And of course, registration leads to confiscation.
Smith believes the right solution is tougher enforcement of existing laws.
Prosecute criminals, not guns.
Now, the mayor also said today that there is, quote, overwhelming support, unquote, in the community for the background checks, but that assertion is disputed by some of his fellow candidates for mayor. You'll be hearing from them in a moment. The U.S. Senate is expected to vote on new gun legislation next month. Rob, Brandy, back to you.
Todd, thanks. Now, we did ask the top candidates hoping to be mayor what they think of this call for legislation.
Dave Navity's campaign says he is opposed to mandatory background checks on all gun purchases. His campaign told us, quote, Dave believes the Second Amendment is absolutely worth protecting and should not be infringed upon.
Dan Welch is also against the push, saying, quote, the problem with further regulation is that it always affects law-abiding citizens and never affects criminals. Gene Stothert tells KETV News Watch 7, quote, I support crime control, not more gun control. Our challenges with crime will not be solved by Congress. They are best addressed locally with open, trusted leadership.
Brad Ashford says a state law he helped pass in 1991 already does what Mayor Suttle is calling for. Ashford says the task now is to work closely with state and federal officials to ensure background checks are done accurately. Omaha's primary